So good morning, everybody. And I've been frantically writing here to kind of rewrite my comments because I don't want to repeat anything that's been said, beginning with Paula Braveman's excellent overview of the knowledge base and my colleagues. So let me try to wing this because I have something that I really want to put on the table in terms of thinking about everything that my colleagues on the panel have talked about is as good a description as you'll ever hear of what the state of the art is, where we are right now in early childhood in terms of what the highest quality programs look like, what the return on investment is, and a wonderful addition of Beth Babcock's comments about a field that has not been considered part of early childhood, that is focusing more on adults independent of their involvement with their children. So what I'd like to do is kind of put a stake in the ground about thinking about how we can use science to begin to think of the current state of the art as a starting point, not a destination, and think about what the conversation will look like when the commission reconvenes in 10 or 15 years, and we better not have nothing new to say. So let me put a couple of thoughts on the table. First, it is absolutely well documented that we know how to improve the odds for better outcomes for children by investing early in good quality programs. But the data that we have are largely focused in the education domain and in ultimate economic productivity. The big returns on investment are largely reduced incarceration. So we know we can make differences there, even though there's still more to do. But health has not been a part of what we've been measuring primarily as outcomes from early childhood investments. And I'd like to present some thoughts about how we can't just tack health on, and we have to think differently about what we should be doing in this very important early childhood space. And that brings me to the second issue, which is this explosion in science. We are living through a revolution in biology, and what this is telling us is not only are the foundations of learning behavior and both physical and mental health laid down very early in life, biologically at the molecular level, and in fact, there's a great deal we're learning about how prenatal development already is having an influence on later outcomes. But more than the excitement about being able to explain and make the case for why early interventions are important, what we're not taking maximum advantage of is the ability for the science to tell us why and how zip code affects health outcomes. What is it about the way we live, learn, work, and play that influences whether you're going to have a chronic illness years later? And the importance of looking at this science in that way is not just to bring greater attention to the need for early focus early in life, but to use it as a way to think about what might we do differently. How could we expand our definition of evidence? So everyone wants evidence-based policies and programs. There is no organized national association for the prevention of evidence-based policies. And we define evidence largely as results of randomized controlled trials and benefit cost studies that are critically important. But we are in big trouble if we don't recognize that principles of biology and what we're learning at the molecular level of how experience does in fact get under the skin, that is powerful evidence. But it's not a cost-benefit study. It's the source of new ideas. So let me give you some examples, and I want to be really clear. This is an example of how we could use the science to think about where to go next, and particularly to improve health outcomes. Because a lot has been said this morning about toxic stress and about the impact of stress on development and on development of the brain. And we might talk more about that in the Q&A. But also, toxic stress accelerates atherosclerosis because of its high inflammatory component. And so when you're stressed early on and it's constant, atherosclerosis is accelerating, which is beginning to open up that black box of what is it about living in a great deal of adversity that makes you have heart disease decades later. Toxic stress accelerates and increases insulin resistance, which leads to metabolic syndrome, which makes you more likely to have obesity and diabetes. It's not magic. We're beginning to learn how this happens. So what do we do? So this is an example of how to use this, and I want to reinforce the fact these are ideas, these are hypotheses. So for number one, the primary theory of change driving most of our early childhood programs is an enrichment model. It's providing enriched experiences for children, focusing on early literacy, providing information for parents. We need to balance, the science says, we need to balance enrichment with protection. We have to protect developing organ systems. We have to protect the cardiovascular system, protect the developing brain, whose circuitry starts out with very little and dramatically increases in the first few years. Second, what does that mean, protection? How do we do that? So, and this is where the importance of the Crittenton Women's Union program in this panel really needs to be underscored. So how are we going to protect the developing brain? How are we going to protect the developing cardiovascular system and immune system? So there are two strategies that we could think about. One is the adults who care for children have to be able to be better prepared to buffer them from the adversities in their lives. And this doesn't come just from giving people advice. It comes from building skills and building capabilities. And these foundational skills of how to buffer children from stress and how to help them develop their own adaptive capacities, which is really getting to the foundations of resilience, which is how we explain overcoming adversity. This isn't hardwired at birth. You learn it. You learn it from adults who model it for you. And if adults themselves have never had that opportunity, then we have to build those skills. We can't just say, protect your child from stress. And when we start building those skills that make for more effective parenting, creating a well-regulated home environment that isn't so chaotic, we're also at the same time, for the same nickel, even though it's somebody else's agenda, building the kind of skills you need to be employable, and the kind of skills you need to be economically competitive in an environment that's demanding a much higher level of skill than just basic reading and math abilities. And when you take that to the next level and link it to the panel that's going to follow ours, the community approach, it's more than just a general, well, how do we build a sense of collective efficacy? How do we strengthen communities? But how do we focus on those sources of toxic stress that exist in a community, violence in a community, substance use in a community? Instead of just helping parents be better at buffering their kids from these sources of adversity, we need to operate at a place-based approach that reduces the strain on families. And this is not just about parents. It's about people who work in programs, as Jessie said. A lot of people who work in early childhood programs are low-income women with limited education. They need that skill building as much as parents do. So what I want to do is use this as an example, not to say this is the answer. What we've been learning from the world of innovation, where people live and breathe every day, they're generating hundreds of new ideas, the Silicon Valleys, the biotechnology parks. Their big breakthroughs come after multiple failures. They try everything, and they know that most of the things they try will fail. There's this wonderful quote from Thomas Edison that says, "I've never failed. I've just tried 10,000 things that don't work." We have not made it safe to try new things in the early childhood space. We have put huge pressures on programs to show that they're making a difference if we're going to continue to fund them. And that is a recipe for the lack of progress and the lack of an environment that promotes new ideas and innovation, and most important, helps people learn from failure, learn from things that don't work. Let's be honest. I mean, I think we have to get real about this, and I hope I'm not stepping on too many toes. There's a lot of evaluation going on in the field. There's tremendous pressure for evidence of effectiveness. And most people are smart enough. That's also part of our biology. We adapt to our environment. Most people collect information to show they're making a difference, so they'll stay in business. Nobody is really seriously putting forth data to show what isn't working, because that's a recipe for self-destruction. That's not a smart political and policy environment for progress. And if we define evidence as only things that have been proved, then it means we're never going to invest in anything new. So this means that this is more than just a government responsibility. This is the natural low-hanging fruit for public-private investment and collaboration. But I want to kind of end with another example. I don't have any data for this, but this is an example of how we have to start trying new things. If you believe where the science takes you, as I do, I believe in the science, but it has its limitations. And what we know now in the science is not as much as we're going to know years down the road. But the science is suggesting that if we really want to have breakthrough impacts on learning and behavior and physical and mental health for children, we have to transform the lives of the adults who take care of them. We can't bypass the adults as if some magic thing will produce better school readiness, less diabetes, less heart disease. And by focusing on the adults, we mean we need to, and some people, when we started to talk about this, said, well, wait a second, it's about the kids, it's not about the adults. Well, everything we know, even before all this brain research, everything we know about child development is that children develop in an environment of relationships. They are shaped, their skills and their health are shaped and influenced by the people around them. So if the people around them don't have the capabilities, not because of a lack of love or interest in their children, but because of their own life experiences, if we want to be smart about producing healthier children, we have to build the capacities of the adults. And the last point I would make about this is that this is getting us back to an old idea that suddenly is becoming a new idea, but it's an old idea, about a two-generation approach. Obviously, it has to be actually a multi-generational approach. In some cases, it's at least 3 generations. But what we have to do is be more creative and move beyond thinking that 2-generation means co-location. 2-generation means interagency agreements between people who focus on kids and people who focus on adults. Where the field is going to make a big difference is to move from co-location to hybridization, where we create not integration in the sense that people are sharing data systems and have easy referrals, but have created new interventions that are literally focusing on building those core capacities of what it takes to be a successful adult. What are those foundational capacities that then become the basis of effective parenting, employability, responsible citizenship in a community, and then we're really talking about something that's going to make a big difference. So I think this is also a good segue to not separate our panel on early childhood from the community development panel. This is about creating an environment of adults who are more capable of using the scientific knowledge we have to produce healthier lives for their children. So I think I'll stop right there.